Hello, welcome to Speaker Reconing, Volume 1. We will start with some tools and supplies you will need to do speaker reconing. A good pair of cuticle scissors comes in handy. You also need a soldering iron. One thing not shown is a vacuum cleaner. You also need masking tape, jars for solvent and other compounds, and some brushes. Speaker reconing requires different adhesives for gluing different parts. I have color-coded these dispensers to make identification easy for you. You will find more information on this in your supply list. Shim stock is used for several different tasks in speaker reconing, as you will see later. Each color represents a different gauge. These items are also on your supply list. We will now take a brief look at the parts we will be using, starting with cones. Speaker cones come in a variety of shapes and materials with different edges. Here are some of the ones we will be using. Voice coils. The voice coil on the right is edge wound, which means they use a special ribbon type wire for the coil winding. The voice coil on the left and in the middle is regular wound and uses round wire for the winding. There are two kinds of spiders, the flat type, which is now showing, and the cup type, which you see here. Dust caps, or dust domes, come in different sizes and material: aluminum, paper, screen, felt, and treated cloth. Because these gaskets are in sections, they are known as sectional gaskets. We will also be using a one-piece gasket. The Electronic Industry Association, or EIA, has assigned code numbers to most speaker manufacturers. I have furnished you with this list. It is a good idea to check the identification numbers and make sure the parts are available. The 67 on this speaker shows us it is an eminence. Check both the frame and the cone for identification numbers. It is a good idea to write down the size of the speaker as well as the identification numbers as they appear on the speaker. Also, a brief description will help in locating the proper kits. You will also find tensile wire and terminal strips on your supply list. An old turntable makes the job a lot easier. However, you can recone without one. We are now ready to prepare the frame for speaker reconing. When you remove the old cone assembly, try and keep it in one piece. We will need this assembly later when we start assembling the new parts. It makes a good reference. A word of caution. Be very careful during this process. You might even want to wear gloves. Some of the cheaper stamp frames can cut you. So I do repeat, be very careful. We are now going to cut the tensile wire. Cut the wires in the center so when you desolder the terminals on the speakers to clean out the eyelets, you'll have something to work with. Some speakers will be harder than others to prepare for reconing. There are solvents available to make this job easier. There are also solvents available for special treatment. For instance, we have waterproofing solvents for marine and auto speakers. We also have dampening compound, as you will see later. We have almost finished cutting the spider so we can remove the cone assembly. We are now ready to vacuum the loose materials. Start with the voice coil gap. Get all loose debris. We will now cover the voice coil gap with masking tape. This will prevent any other trash from falling into the gap while we finish the speaker. We can now continue to clean the speaker. Try to get your knife as close to the metal part as you can when we start to remove the gasket, and take it off in one piece if you can. Sometimes they won't. Now we will try and remove the spider. Now we will finish cleaning it up. This preparation, by the way, seems to me to be the hardest part of speaker reconing, and it's not that bad. We will now remove the tensile wire. Once again, vacuum. I like to go around to music stores and buy their old frames and recone them and sell them. This is a good way to get introduced to speaker reconing. Remove the tape and vacuum again. We are now ready to cut some shim stock. I usually cut the width between 2 and 3 inches. The voice coil gap will determine the length of the shim. We will also need to cut some strips about a half inch wide and 3 to 4 inches long. We will use these to clean out the voice coil gap, which is a very important part in this process. Fold the masking tape over the shims to make a cleaning tube, as I am doing here. You will want the sticky side out. It is very important that you remove all the trash in the voice coil gap. You will probably need to change this tape several times and keep going over this cleaning process until you see no more trash on the tape. Any trash in the voice coil gap could cause it to rub and you would have to recone it over. So make sure, you might even want to look in it with a magnifying glass and a pen light. The magnet power will also make magnetic material stick, so just make sure there's nothing in the voice coil gap. Keep repeating this process. Now let's examine the old cone assembly. Notice how the adhesive was applied. Look at this dust dome. Removing the dust cap, I see that this speaker was glued from the front, and this technique represents front type glued speakers, or the spider and the cone both are glued to the voice coil, as you see here, and there is no glue on the back side. We are now ready to cut the shim to the proper length. We are overlapping it here, however, we will mark it so we can cut. You don't want the seam to overlap. We're marking it, and we will cut it with scissors.